I remember that Halloween night like it just happened. It was one of those quiet evenings where the world outside felt frozen, yet something in the air carried tension. I lived alone in a small apartment complex on the 3rd floor, the kind of place where the windows looked directly over the parking lot. That night, I wasn't expecting anything strange, just a simple Zoom call with a few coworkers who wanted to hang out virtually since none of us had plans. I had my laptop open on the small dining table near the window. The orange glow from a streetlight outside cast faint shadows across my wall. A couple of kids were still trick-or-treating below, their laughter fading as they disappeared around the corner. It was almost peaceful, except for the faint feeling that the night didn't quite feel right, like something was watching. Our Zoom call started like any other. Everyone joked about costumes and candy, laughing about the bad internet connections. My camera faced the window behind me, which showed a bit of the night sky in the background. I didn't notice anything strange until the 2nd hour of our call, when I thought I heard something tap against the glass behind me. I paused mid-laugh and turned around. The window was dark, reflecting the faint image of my own face. Nothing there. No birds, no branches, just the still night outside. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just the wind or a piece of candy wrapper flying up from the street. I went back to the call, not realizing my coworkers had gone silent for a few seconds before one of them spoke. "Hey dude," my friend Jason said through the mic. "Is someone standing behind you?" My heart skipped a beat as I froze. I turned again, slower this time, scanning the reflection in the glass. Nothing. My window looked empty, and when I turned back toward the screen, Jason was squinting like he was unsure of what he'd seen. "Never mind," he muttered with an uneasy laugh. "Probably just your reflection or something." We moved on, but I couldn't shake the image from my mind. For the next 20 minutes, I kept glancing at the window every few seconds. My apartment felt colder than usual, even though the heat was on. The tapping sound came again, this time sharper, like a knuckle hitting glass. I muted my mic, stood up, and stepped closer to the window. My breath fogged the glass as I looked down at the parking lot below. It was empty. No one near my building, no movement at all. I opened the blinds slightly, peering outside. Just the motionless streetlight and a few pumpkins glowing faintly on neighbors' balconies. I let out a nervous chuckle and sat back down, trying to ignore how my hands were trembling. The others were laughing again about something, but I barely heard them. My attention was fixed on the faint reflection in the glass. I swore I saw something shift in the dark behind me, something that moved when I didn't. The 3rd knock came louder this time, a slow, deliberate tap against the glass. My stomach dropped. Jason stopped talking mid-sentence, and another coworker asked if I was okay. I stared at the window and whispered, "Someone's knocking." For a few seconds, nobody on the call spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of my laptop fan and the soft static from someone's microphone. Then Jason nervously laughed and said, "You're kidding, right?" I didn't answer. I was staring straight at the window, watching as the faint outline of a hand slowly dragged across the glass. It left behind a misty streak, like someone was breathing against it from the outside. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. The air in my apartment suddenly felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I took a hesitant step toward the window, half expecting to see a prankster or a dangling branch, but I lived on the 3rd floor. There was no balcony, no ledge, and definitely no way for anyone to be outside that window. The handprint was still there, faintly visible under the streetlight glow. "Guys," I whispered, my voice shaking, "there's no way anyone could reach my window." I turned my webcam to show them, angling it toward the glass. "See? Nothing's there." The camera focused on the dark reflection, and that's when Jason shouted, "Wait, what's that?" I flinched and turned around, but again, just emptiness. I shut the blinds immediately, my heart racing. Everyone on the call started talking at once, telling me to check my door, to call the police, to record it. I told them it was probably a draft or condensation, but even I didn't believe that. I sat back down and tried to act normal, though I couldn't keep my eyes off the blinds. Every creak in the room made me jump. 5 minutes later, the tapping came back, this time softer, slower, almost like someone was testing if I'd notice. My stomach twisted. I unmuted my mic. "It's happening again," I said quietly. Jason told me to lift the blinds, but my gut told me not to. The tapping didn't stop. It got faster, like fingertips drumming impatiently. Finally, I grabbed my phone, switched on the flashlight, and yanked the blinds open. Nothing, just my own pale reflection staring back at me. But then, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Tiny smudges along the bottom edge of the window frame. They looked like fingerprints but pressed from the inside. I slowly backed away, my phone trembling in my hand. My coworkers were calling my name from the laptop, but their voices felt distant, distorted by static. I closed the window latch tight and sat down again, trying to convince myself I was just tired. Maybe I'd touched the glass earlier and forgot. That had to be it. Jason was still talking, asking if I wanted him to stay on the call. I nodded silently. The warmth of the laptop screen felt strangely comforting now, like it connected me to something real. For a moment, everything seemed calm again. But then, from behind the blinds, I heard a quiet scraping sound, slow and deliberate, like a nail dragging along the glass. I froze. My eyes flicked toward the window, waiting for it to stop. The scraping grew louder, circling the edge of the frame, then pausing directly where I sat. The air went still, so still I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I wanted to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Then something pressed against the blinds from the outside, just enough to make the fabric bend inward. I didn't move for what felt like an entire minute. My breath came out in short, shaky bursts as I stared at that small dent pushing through the blinds. Then it withdrew, slow and silent, as if whoever, or whatever, was there didn't want to be seen. I stood up, gripping the edge of my desk. My friends on the Zoom call were still watching, faces frozen, waiting for me to do something. "Call someone," Jason said, his voice cracking. I shook my head, trying to think logically. Maybe there was a ledge outside I'd never noticed, or some maintenance platform. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. My building was old and narrow, no balcony, no fire escape on this side. The window looked over a narrow alley that ended in a brick wall. Nobody could be out there, not without climbing straight up 3 stories of flat concrete. Still, I had to look. Against every instinct screaming not to, I stepped closer and lifted the blinds again. The glass was clear this time, no handprints, no shadows, just the reflection of my pale face and the dim light behind me. I leaned in a little closer, my breath fogging the glass, and that's when something tapped back from the other side. 3 slow, distinct knocks. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over the chair. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered. Everyone on the Zoom call started shouting at once, their voices overlapping in a panic. Jason yelled for me to get out. Someone else said to lock the door. I ran to my front door and checked the bolt. It was locked. My windows were locked. My mind was racing so fast I could barely think straight. Suddenly the sound came again, but this time it wasn't the window. It was from the hallway outside my apartment. A soft, dragging scrape moving along the door, followed by a faint knock. The walls seemed to tighten around me, every sound amplified in the silence. I crept closer, pressing my ear to the wood. A whisper, so faint I couldn't make out the words, came from the other side. I took a shaky step back, staring at the door. My laptop screen was still glowing behind me, showing the horrified faces of my coworkers. Jason said he was calling the cops. I wanted to tell him not to bother, that maybe it was just a prank, but then I heard it again, the voice, this time clearer. It whispered my name. That broke me. I backed away from the door, grabbed my keys and ran to my bedroom. I locked myself inside, phone in hand, trembling. The knocking on the door stopped after a few seconds, replaced by silence so deep it made my ears ring. Then just when I thought it was over, I heard the faint creak of my living room window sliding open. I couldn't see it from where I was, but I didn't have to. The air felt colder now, heavier, like the room was breathing with me. I stayed there, curled against the wall, until I finally heard sirens outside. When the cops arrived, they said all the windows were still locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Nothing disturbed. They left after searching the place, assuring me it was probably just the wind. But the next morning, when sunlight hit the glass, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A single wet handprint high up on the outside of my 3rd floor window. I don't know how it got there. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Halloween night had always been my favorite. That year, I invited a few close friends over for a simple movie night. No big parties, just snacks, dim lights, and a stack of horror films. It was chilly outside, the kind of October air that smells like damp leaves and wood smoke. My apartment felt cozy, filled with the soft hum of the TV and the occasional laughter between us. Nothing about that night seemed out of the ordinary. We were halfway through our second movie when the first weird thing happened. The TV flickered for a moment, just static and a faint buzz. We thought it was the streaming service glitching. I grabbed the remote, ready to restart it, but before I could press anything, the static cleared on its own. The screen showed a dark, grainy image that didn't match any movie we'd picked. At first, it looked like a security camera feed. The angle was high, slightly tilted down, showing a couch, coffee table, and soft light from a lamp. It took a few seconds before I realized why it looked so familiar, because it was familiar. The layout, the furniture, even the half-eaten bowl of popcorn on the table. It was my living room. We all froze. My friend Mason leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Dude, that's your place," he said quietly, his tone shifting from amused to uneasy. I grabbed the remote again, pressing buttons, but none of them did anything. The volume controls, menu, even power, nothing responded. The image stayed the same, slightly shaking as if filmed by a camera hidden somewhere. For a second we laughed nervously, trying to rationalize it. "Maybe it's some creepy Easter egg," Jenna said, "like one of those found footage movies." But deep down, I could feel something wasn't right. I looked around the room, scanning every corner, trying to spot where a camera could possibly be. The feed was too perfect. It matched the exact angle we were sitting from, like it was showing us from a few feet above. Then the feed flickered again, and the camera zoomed in slightly. It was subtle, but we all saw it. The focus shifted to Mason, sitting closest to the TV, his outline grainy but clear. Everyone went quiet. The air felt colder somehow, heavier, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Jenna whispered, "Is someone in here right now?" Nobody answered. I stood up and moved slowly toward the TV, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I leaned closer, I noticed something strange in the top right corner of the screen. A faint movement, like a shadow passing behind the camera. I stepped back instantly. Mason grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, scanning the room. Nothing. No lens glare, no hidden device, just the same cozy space we'd been sitting in all evening. Yet on the TV, the feed was still playing, still showing us, still slightly zoomed in, and then just for a split second, the camera angle tilted, as if someone behind it had moved. Mason cursed under his breath and rushed to the front door, yanking it open. The hallway outside was empty and silent. No footsteps, no echo, just the faint hum of the building's heating system. I followed, glancing nervously over my shoulder at the TV. The live feed was still running, now slightly panned toward the doorway, as if whoever was filming wanted to show that we'd left the frame. I told Mason to check the hallway camera feed from the building's security app, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely type in his passcode. Jenna stayed near the couch, whispering, "This isn't funny anymore." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. None of us had been recording anything, and even if we had, it made no sense for it to show up on the TV like that. Then, something changed in the feed. The image zoomed out slightly, revealing not just our living room, but also the hallway beyond the open door. And standing there, right where Mason had been a few seconds ago, was a dark shape, tall, motionless, and turned slightly toward the camera. Mason came back inside immediately, slamming the door behind him. "No one's out there," he said, breathing hard. But the second he turned to face the TV, his expression drained. We all stared at the figure frozen on screen. It didn't move, didn't step forward, just stood there, half in the hallway light, half in shadow. I tried unplugging the TV. The screen went black for a moment, but when it came back on, the live feed was still there. "How is that even possible?" Jenna whispered. My mind raced for an explanation. Maybe some hacker had accessed the smart TV. Maybe it was a prank. But deep down I knew this was different. This felt wrong in a way technology couldn't explain. Suddenly, the figure turned. The movement was slow and smooth, almost unnatural. Its head angled toward the camera, and though the face was too blurred to make out, we could tell it was looking straight at us. Then the feed glitched, horizontal lines tearing across the image, before freezing completely. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then, faintly, the sound of static started leaking from the speakers again. It wasn't constant. It pulsed, like breathing. I muted the TV, but the static kept coming, a low, hissing rhythm that filled the room. Mason shouted, "Unplug it!" I pulled the cord from the wall completely. This time the screen went black and stayed that way. The silence that followed was almost worse. We all sat there listening to the building creak, every little sound amplified by tension. After a minute, Jenna let out a shaky laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "Maybe we just need a break," she said. "Grab a drink or something." Mason agreed, heading toward the kitchen, but I noticed something strange on the blank TV screen. It wasn't reflecting us anymore. Normally, when it was off, you could see our silhouettes faintly in the dark glass, but now the reflection showed the room empty. The couch, the lamp, the coffee table, just no one sitting there. I blinked a few times thinking it was just the angle or the lighting, but no, it was clear. The screen showed the same room we were standing in, only completely empty. I took a step closer and the reflection didn't change. It still showed no one, even though I was standing directly in front of it. My voice trembled when I called for Mason and Jenna to look. When they came over, the reflection shifted again, now showing the three of us, but our movements were a few seconds delayed. Mason waved his hand slowly, testing it. The reflection copied him, but only after a pause. Jenna covered her mouth, whispering, "It's like it's recording us." But from before. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I turned to check the room, half expecting to see someone behind us, but it was just us, and that eerie, lagging reflection. Suddenly, the TV clicked back on by itself. The live feed returned, showing our living room from the same angle as before. But this time, we weren't in it. The couch was empty again. The lamp was still on. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. The front door in the feed was wide open. Mason ran to check the real door. It was shut and locked. When he turned back, his face had gone pale. "It's closed here," he said, "but it's open on the screen." Jenna whispered, "What if it's showing what's about to happen?" The idea hit me so hard I couldn't even respond. We all just stood there, staring at that open door on the TV, waiting for something, anything, to move. After a few tense seconds, a faint shape appeared in the doorway on screen. It looked like someone was stepping into the apartment. My stomach dropped. I turned toward our actual door, listening. Nothing. But on the screen, the figure was already halfway inside, pausing right behind the couch. "Turn it off," Jenna cried, but Mason couldn't move. His eyes were glued to the TV, watching as the figure leaned closer toward the camera's viewpoint. Then, for the first time, we saw its face, or at least something resembling one. It looked disturbingly familiar. It was me. The figure on the screen looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same stance, same expression. It stared into the camera for a few seconds, then slowly turned its head toward where the real TV should have been. That's when the screen flickered violently, distorting both versions of the room into static and shadows. Mason yanked the plug from the wall again, and this time, the TV went completely dark. The three of us just stood there, barely breathing. Nobody said a word for several minutes. When we finally calmed down enough to move, we packed our stuff and left the apartment together, spending the night at Mason's place. I didn't sleep. Every creak, every passing car light outside made my stomach twist. When I came back the next morning, daylight made everything seem normal again. I almost convinced myself it had been some bizarre electronic glitch until I looked at the TV. It was still unplugged, but the screen wasn't black. It showed a faint frozen image, 3 people sitting on a couch staring right at the camera, and one of them was smiling. Halloween has always felt different in my hometown. It wasn't about parties or candy anymore. It was more about nostalgia, old memories, and the thrill of pretending something could actually scare you. My best friend Ryan and I had that tradition every year. We'd pick a horror movie marathon, make fun of the cheap effects, and stay up until dawn trying to freak each other out. Last Halloween started the same way, but it didn't end that way. That night, we were sitting in my living room surrounded by leftover decorations and half-melted candles. Ryan was scrolling through his phone, trying to find something new to watch, when he said something that, at the time, I brushed off. "Man," he laughed, "I'd sell my soul for a good scare this year." I looked up from my drink, smirking. "Be careful what you wish for," I joked. He grinned, raised his glass, and said, "Let's hope something actually answers." We laughed, but I remember something about the way he said it, calm, almost too casual, made me feel uneasy. The candlelight flickered at that exact moment, and Ryan chuckled again, saying, "See? Even the universe wants to play along." That was the last normal moment of the night. After a few movies, Ryan got up to grab his phone charger from the kitchen. When he didn't come back after a minute or two, I figured he'd gone to the bathroom. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the TV. Then from the kitchen, I heard what sounded like muffled laughter. It was Ryan's voice, but it didn't sound right. It was quieter, slower, almost like he was talking to someone else. I called out to him, "You good in there?" No answer. I got up and walked toward the kitchen, the floor creaking under my socks. The lights were off, and I could just make out his phone sitting on the counter, the screen still glowing. It was open to his messages, And the last text he'd sent wasn't to me. It was to an unsaved number. The message read, "Okay, I'm in. What do I have to do?" For a second I thought it was a joke, maybe a prank he'd set up for Halloween. Ryan was always the type to push things too far for a laugh. But when I called his name again, the house felt wrong, like the air had thickened. That playful, easy vibe we always had was just gone. I picked up his phone, scrolling up to see more, but the number's previous messages were missing. Just that one text. I called out for him again, louder this time, and that's when I heard it, a faint sound from the backyard. It was rhythmic, like footsteps on wet grass. I walked toward the window and peeked through the blinds. The motion sensor light flicked on, and I caught a glimpse of something, or someone, standing at the edge of the yard. It looked like Ryan. Same hoodie, same posture, but he wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the house, head tilted slightly to the side. I tapped the glass lightly and called his name. He didn't react, not even a twitch. At first, I thought maybe Ryan was messing with me. It would have been exactly his kind of joke, creepy, but harmless. I even laughed nervously and said, "All right, man, you got me." But when I blinked, the light went out and he was gone. The yard was empty again. The sudden darkness made my stomach twist. I opened the back door and stepped outside, the cold air hitting me like a wall. "Ryan?" I called out, scanning the yard. Nothing, just the sound of dry leaves rustling. I pulled out my phone to text him, but before I could type, I got a message from his number. It said, "You shouldn't come looking for me." My hands went cold. I turned around, half expecting to see him behind me, laughing at how easy it was to scare me, but there was no one there. The house looked dark through the window. Too dark, even though I'd left the lights on inside. I stepped back in, locking the door behind me. I called his phone, but the ringing sound came from the kitchen counter. His phone was still there, still glowing faintly. That's when I noticed something new on the screen, a notification from an unknown app I didn't recognize. Its icon was just a plain black circle. The notification read, "Offer accepted." I tried opening the app, but it just crashed. No logo, no loading screen, nothing. I felt a shiver crawl up my neck. The air in the house suddenly felt colder. I decided to call his parents, but before I could, a soft knock echoed from the front door. Slow, measured, 3 times. I froze, staring at the door. I didn't move, didn't say anything. After a few seconds, the knocking came again, louder this time. My instinct told me to check the peephole, but something about the rhythm of those knocks made me feel like that was exactly what it wanted me to do. I backed away slowly, whispering to myself, "It's just someone messing around. It has to be." The third knock was so loud it made a picture frame fall from the wall. I jumped, heart pounding. I ran to grab a flashlight and shined it toward the door from across the room. The light beam caught a shape through the frosted glass, a head, tilted just like Ryan's had been in the yard. I didn't breathe. The handle moved slightly, just enough to make the door creak, then silence. I waited for footsteps, but none came. I stood there for nearly a full minute before I gathered enough courage to look through the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty. I turned back toward the kitchen to grab my keys, but the TV in the living room suddenly flickered on by itself. The screen was pure static at first, then it cut to what looked like live footage from inside my house. It was showing me, standing right there, staring at the TV. I froze completely. It was like watching myself from someone else's perspective. The image was slightly tilted, the camera positioned low to the ground, facing me from somewhere near the hallway. My pulse spiked as I turned toward the direction the angle was pointing from, the small gap near the stairs leading to the basement. Nothing but darkness. I took a few shaky steps toward it, whispering, "Ryan, if this is you, stop messing around." No response. The only sound was the faint hum of the TV behind me. I knelt down slowly, shining my flashlight toward the gap beneath the stairs. My beam hit something, a reflection, a lens. There was actually a camera hidden there. My breath caught in my throat. I crawled forward and reached to pull it out, but before my fingers touched it, the light from my flashlight started to flicker and die. Then from the darkness below the stairs, I heard breathing, slow, raspy, and very close. I stumbled backward, scrambling to my feet. "Who's down there?" I yelled, but my voice cracked. The breathing stopped. Then the basement door swung open just a few inches, like something had brushed it from the inside. I didn't stay to find out what. It was instinct. I ran to the front door, threw it open, and bolted outside. The cold night air hit me hard and I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the street. When I finally looked back, the lights in my house were on again, all of them. Every single window glowed with a faint orange tint, and in one of them, the living room window, I saw someone standing there. It was Ryan, or at least, something that looked like him. His posture was stiff, his face expressionless, and both of his hands were pressed flat against the glass, watching me. I called the cops from my neighbor's porch, barely able to get words out. They came within minutes, searched the house, and found nothing. No signs of a break-in, no hidden cameras, no footprints. Just the TV still on, still showing that same grainy live feed. But now the frame was empty, no one in it. They told me I'd probably imagined things, maybe a prank gone too far. But here's the thing, when they checked Ryan's house the next day, he wasn't there either. His parents said they hadn't seen him since Halloween night. His car was still in the driveway, his phone still on my counter, but no one could find him. And that strange black app? It disappeared from his phone as soon as they tried to open it again. Sometimes when I'm up late scrolling through my phone, my screen flickers for a split second, and I see something, like a reflection of a dark room behind me. It's always too fast to be sure. But every Halloween since then, I get a text from his number, the same 3 words every time. Your turn now.